Napoleon Bonaparte. You've heard the name. To some, he was a hero, a revolutionary. To others, a tyrant. But almost everyone misunderstands him. The truth is, he was a force of nature who completely redrew the map of Europe. And his legacy? Well, it's something we're still grappling with today. You know, even his greatest enemy, the Duke of Wellington, the man who finally beat him, said it all. On the battlefield, Napoleon's presence alone was worth an entire army. The man was a military genius, plain and simple. So that's the big question, isn't it? How does a kid from a small island, an outsider who was bullied for his accent, go on to become the most powerful person on the entire continent? Let's get into it because this story is about so much more than just battles. It's about raw ambition, revolution, and an unstoppable will to power. Right, so to really get Napoleon the Emperor, you first have to understand Napoleon the boy from Corsica, a boy who, believe it or not, didn't even think of himself as French. See, here's something you might not know. Napoleon was born on Corsica, and he grew up actually hating the French. He dreamed of an independent Corsica, but then the French Revolution exploded, and he saw his opening. He realized his destiny wasn't on that tiny island. It was in the chaos and opportunity of France. So he made a huge choice. He ditched his Corsican identity and went all in on the revolution. And once he made that choice, his rise was just insane. At just 24 years old, his brilliant use of artillery makes him the hero of the siege of Toulon. A couple of years later, he literally saves the government by turning cannons on a mob in the streets of Paris. And his reward for that? They make him commander of the army of Italy. He was only 27. Now, Italy is where Napoleon showed everyone he wasn't just another talented general. Oh no, he was a natural leader, a master of PR, and a political powerhouse just waiting to happen. He gets there, and the army is a total wreck, starving, undisciplined, forgotten. And he turns them into an unstoppable force. How? He gets in the trenches with them. He remembers their names. He makes sure they get paid. But he also became his own PR machine. He started his own newspapers, sending back these thrilling stories from the front that made him a rock star in Paris. Soon, he was so popular and so powerful, he was cutting his own deals with foreign powers, not even asking for permission. He was acting more like a king than a general. So after a bit of a mixed adventure in Egypt, he gets back to France, finds the government in shambles, and thinks, this is my moment. He teams up with some shady politicians, marches his soldiers into the government chambers, and basically scares everyone into giving him power. He becomes first consul. But that wasn't enough. In this incredible display of ego and power, he later takes the crown right out of the Pope's hands during his coronation and crowns himself. Just like that, the kid from Corsica is now Napoleon I, Emperor of the French. But here's the thing. He wasn't just a warmonger. As emperor, he created the Napoleonic Code. This was a complete game changer. It took France's ancient, confusing mess of laws and replaced them with a single, logical system. For the first time, ideas from the revolution, like equality before the law and the right to own property, were written down for everyone. This thing swept away centuries of aristocratic privilege, and its ideas are still the foundation for legal systems all over the world. Okay, so with France under his control and with his new legal code in place, he sets the stage for the absolute peak of his power. This is the moment when Napoleon, for a short time, was the undisputed master of Europe. This is his masterpiece, the Battle of Austerlitz. He's facing down the combined armies of Austria and Russia. He's outnumbered. So what does he do? He pretends his army is weak. He tricks them into attacking exactly where he wants them to, and then he absolutely demolishes them. It was a tactical masterclass. This one battle was so decisive, it pretty much blew up the 1,000-year-old Holy Roman Empire and left Napoleon in charge of the continent. But even at the height of his powers, you can see the cracks starting to form. Two huge mistakes. First, he tries to wage economic war on Britain with his continental system. It was basically a huge trade embargo that ended up hurting everyone in Europe more than it hurt the British. And second, his invasion of Spain turns into this endless, brutal guerrilla war that he called his Spanish ulcer. It just bled his empire of men, money, and morale for years. You know, in the end, Napoleon's greatest enemy wasn't another general or some grand alliance. It was his own ambition. It was the one thing he could never conquer. So, in 1812, he decides he's going to crush Russia, his last real rival on the continent. To do it, he puts together the largest European army ever seen in history. We're talking more than 600,000 soldiers. And this is how many made it back alive. The invasion was a catastrophe. The Russians just kept retreating, burning the earth behind them. By the time Napoleon reached an empty Moscow, winter was setting in. His grand army wasn't destroyed in some epic battle. It was wiped out by starvation, typhus, and the brutal, unforgiving Russian cold. It was one of the worst military disasters of all time. That disaster in Russia shattered the myth that Napoleon was invincible. It was like blood in the water. All his old enemies saw their chance, they ganged up and formed a massive coalition. At the Battle of Leipzig, the so-called Battle of the Nations, they finally overwhelmed him. He was forced to give up his throne and was sent into exile. But of course, the story isn't over yet. In one of the most incredible comebacks in history, he escapes from his island prison of Elba, lands in France with a handful of men, and the entire country just rallies to him for one last campaign, the 100 Days. It all comes to a head at one final legendary battle, Waterloo. There, he's beaten for the last time by Wellington and the Allies. This time, they send him to St. Helena, a desolate rock in the middle of the Atlantic, where he finally dies 6 years later, writing the memoirs that would define his own legend. So, after all that, what do we make of him? Was he a hero who spread the ideas of the revolution and modernized Europe? Or a tyrant whose ego led to the deaths of millions? The real answer is, he was all of those things. A genius, a monster, a reformer, a conqueror. He was a deeply complicated and brilliant man, and his story is the ultimate proof that history is never, ever black and white.